Hi, we're about to call the meeting back to order. Before we do, because we have a number of people who just walked in, I just wanted to check and see if anybody else has a comment card that they would like to submit before we start the meeting. Okay, thank you. The board just returned from executive session. We actually have to officially vote to reconvene our general session. I will go ahead and move that we reconvene the regular board meeting. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. It should also be noted that we have a temporary absence of Dr. Barnard. She is over attending senior night with her son for the basketball game. And she will be back with us when that is over. So we'll proceed with the next action item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes for the November 10th, 2021 work study session and business meeting. I will second. So we have a motion and a second on the approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. The next item is informational reports, beginning with a summary of current events, which will be provided to us by Superintendent Glass.
Good evening. In the board packet, you have the progress on the superintendent goals since the very beginning of the year, and wanted to share with you about Grandpersons Day. We had 318 grandpersons and 307 children, and Mrs. Pukowski and Mrs. Jenkins came and helped serve along with a lot of other volunteers. But the most exciting part was that we actually had some kids from the high school come this year and help serve coffee and help students and their families with their food. So it was a great event. And Julie indicated that was the largest in 7 years. And that's all I have.
Next, we have governing board reports. Mr. Sarr, do you have anything to report? Mrs. Reed?
No.
Mrs. Burkowski?
I the grandparents did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I love when the kids came and they say, "Are your potatoes ready for gravy?"
Yes, I concur. It was a very enjoyable activity. It was wonderful to see so many grandparents and all the students, and yes, our high school volunteers. It's one of those things that's like, man, it would be nice if we could do this once a month. It was really a lot of fun. All right.
I agree.
We'll move on to reports. Do we have any Stugo members with us this evening for Stugo report? Excellent. Will you please step forward? Come on up. Introduce yourselves, what grade you're from.
I'm from
Come on, you come right on up front. Sorry, I hope you don't mind. We won't bite.
And you'll take support. Okay?
Okay.
But we don't bite.
Well, so far we've been doing pretty good in Stugo. We've been planning many events, and also we recently planned a sponsor with, I believe, Chipotle, yeah. We recently, I believe, a couple months ago, we tried to plan a sponsor with them. We've been planning more events such as, like Buff Puff, and we tried like candy cane grams or whatever, blue grams. And well, we've been trying to fundraise as much money as we can to get, and enough money for homecoming and prom. So I hope that we do succeed and more.
Do you have a fundraising goal that you're trying to hit?
Well, I haven't really fully caught up with what our goals are because I just joined Stugo since the 2 weeks after school started this year, so I'm still trying to catch up. I don't really have too much info to give you about all of our plans, but I hope that this is enough for you.
Do any of your fellow Stugo members have any other details to share?
Sure.
He's going to discuss homecoming and discuss prom.
Perfect. And you guys are from the junior class?
I'm junior, he's sophomore.
Okay.
Hello there, my name is Chris Town. I am the current sophomore president. I will now be handing you guys out a little paper about homecoming.
Thank you.
Homecoming is going to be our latest dance. It's going to be planned for February 12th, as you can see on the paper. We plan a budget for about $1,320. We will let this district know if it will go any more above or below the required budget we are going for. The event is going to be taking place in the end building of the big gymnasium that's on the right side if you go in. It's going to be very fun. It's going to be an excellent little event. Bring your friend, bring your enemy, or bring just no one. Whatever makes you feel fine. But other than that, the theme will be Is the Rabbit Hole. We've all seen Alice in Wonderland. It's a very musical, FHUSD feel. We're going to be having a lot of line decorations, a lot of heart decorations. It's going to be Valentine's Day week, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we just want to propose this just to let you guys know that we're going to be doing this and to let me know your approval for it. Thank you very much.
I have a question. Because I think I must have missed something. I'm not up to speed. I see in all caps, we will not have soda this time. Was there an issue?
Yes. Yes. Let me tell you a story. So, don't worry, I won't take much of your time. So, at the last of the dance we had, which was homecoming, we had soda, which was amazing because kids were throwing it across the gymnasium. So, not a pleasant experience, I'll tell you that. But we just plan on having water as the main drink for this time. If you wanted to know any details about the PO information, please notify Mr. Keating, FHUSD.org, and he will give you some info on what we will be ordering for our PO.
Okay.
Any other questions for you guys?
I don't think so. It was a very thorough report.
Thank you.
Very nice.
I tried my hardest.
Okay, hi,
I didn't follow that, right?
I know. I have this little My name's Diana Boss. I'm a junior, not the president, just the junior. So I'm going to talk about prom a little bit. So it's right now it's scheduled for April 30th, 2022. We have, I believe we've gotten the venue actually solidified. It's all planned out. So it's going to be, and we're keeping it a secret from most everyone, the students. So it's going to be the Legacy Ballroom in Phoenix. And we just signed our approval contract, and we're waiting on the forms for a security deposit. And then the theme is going to be Cosmic Nights, so it should be pretty cool. We're going to keep, again, the prom date, venue, theme, are all kind of secret, just because we want it to be a little bit more fun. We'll release it when it's closer. And then, so we want to do a free ticket drawing, as well as a prom spirit week, and a prom promo video, and probably a little small intro event the week before the actual prom. In the past years, we've done a prom fashion show, but people don't really seem to be interested in it anymore, so we're going to try and figure something else out. But we're going to figure it out.
Do some kind of round
Okay, any other questions?
But Krista, you may wanna not put in their location or their team.
Yeah.
That's a surprise.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't wanna be the cause of the meeting.
That's a good
The prom team too early. Don't put that in the minutes.
Got it. Anything else?
No, I think we're good. Thank you. It was a very excellent update. We really appreciate the team sharing the information with us.
Thank you.
Almost that,
Okay, next on the agenda as far as informational reports, included in our board packet are the site council minutes on pages 19 through 28, the student activity and auxiliary accounts on 29 through 36, the unaudited financial report is pages 37 through 38, and then current enrollment and withdrawal are on 39 and 40. Any questions or discussion from the board on these items? I'm also going to ask Superintendent Glass any additional comments about enrollments or withdrawals.
We've seen some pretty significant, increase in enrollment at Michelle Mountain in the last couple of weeks, so we're really excited about that.
Anything else from the rest of the board? I will just say that I continue to really enjoy, Mrs. King, the new format for the activity and auxiliary accounts. They're so much more readable and understandable, so thank you for your efforts in organizing our financial data and making it more consumable for the board. All right, and now is the time for public comment before we start calling up individuals who signed the public comment card. We do have, we do have some reminders about the call to the public and policy. So Mrs. Britkowski, please turn on your mic.
It's up. Call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment. Time limits may be allocated on public comment at the discretion of the board president for the board to efficiently complete its business. The board reserves the right to prohibit any comments made in a discourteous and threatening manner. Complaints about specific individuals, students, or personnel are discouraged. Personnel issues should be directed to the appropriate staff member or administrator per district policy. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01 H, action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date.
Thank you. All right, the first comment card we have is from Heather Chandler. Will you please step forward? And we will give 3 minutes for each individual public comment. I do have a timer on, so at 30 seconds, I'll give you like a 30-second warning. I'm just going to interject and say it. It's going to be rude, but I don't mean to be rude. All right, go ahead.
Sure. So I apologize for my lack of preparation, but I really had no intention of speaking today. However, with the latest situations currently occurring within our district, I felt that it was important to say a few words. First of all, thank you all for continuing to give our students, teachers, and administration the opportunity to have as close to a normal school year as possible. I know that personally, I personally have noticed a huge emotional shift in many students from last year, and that is completely a result of your current procedures, so we thank you. The reason I'm here today is related to the continued turnover and mass exodus that continues to plague our little district. I am extremely concerned to see the continuation of employees leaving. I have never been in school district administration, but I view it very similar to any other managerial position. And with that, I would like to take you through my perspective. Please bear with me, and I imagine, if you will, our district is a large box retail store, like Nordstrom Fashion Square. Our superintendent would be the store manager, the site principals, department heads, and the teachers are sales associates. The store is plugging along and a new manager takes over. Anytime that happens, there are always a few department heads and sales associates that leave with the former store manager. Change is to be expected, we understand that. Now let's say every department head has been replaced, in addition to like 50% of the sales force and even more with support staff have all been turned over. Then the next round of department heads start turning over again. New sales associates continue to leave, and the cycle continues to spiral. At some point, corporate, i.e. the school board, has to start looking at it being a possibility. Perhaps all the sales associates, department heads, old, new, and new again, etc., can't all be the problem. At some point, corporate has to start looking at when this huge spiral started and really review what the issue is. How is the store's guest satisfaction rating? Does the store get lots of repeat customers, or are they now stopping at Neiman's? How about the departments? Are the department heads and associates happy with their work environment? Do they feel comfortable and secure with their store leadership? How is their employee satisfaction rating?
30 seconds.
At some point, the GM has to be held accountable for what is happening. While I do not know what the answer is to this, I feel it is your duty as our corporate, our school board, to really start working and dig through this mess, because closing McDowell is in the situation. Continuing to replace associates at record speed is not the solution. Our school district is on fire, and rather than continuing to add more and more fuel to the flame, someone needs to get an extinguisher and put a stop to this mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Randy Paulson.
Hi. So I've never been to a board meeting. It's nice that you guys are friendly.
Well, we don't fight kids.
So, I came here today because, I've heard some rumors, and my own personal experience has to do with resignations that have occurred. At the end of last year is when I had one of my children starting at McDowell Mountain, and we absolutely loved the teacher. And the principal at that time seemed very kind, and in all the interactions I had, she just seemed awesome and great. And then the year ended with she's leaving, and why is she leaving? And the teacher that we thought was amazing, that had been around forever, that everybody knew, was also leaving, but because she was leaving, and it just left a lot of questions and concerns, and I'm just very curious, and I really want to know what happened then, and then now what's bringing me in today, really as of just a few hours ago, is that there's more resignations occurring. And I had a chance to meet with, I guess, the current principal, or the soon-to-not-be current principal, to address a concern about a teacher who had resigned in my other child's class. And so I meet with the principal on the same day. She gets me in. She meets with me and my wife for an hour to reassure us that she is going to be able to replace this person who had resigned. And then here I am a few weeks later. The new teacher is in there. My son is so happy to have this new teacher. And then all of a sudden today, a few hours ago, I found out that not only is that teacher potentially leaving, I mean, I don't even know what's going on, but that the principal's gone now, is what I'm hearing. And what I don't want to do is spread rumors or, something that's not accurate, but I mean, from a parent in a small school district, me and my wife both graduated right over there. We moved away. We fought hard to come back to this district. And I'm just scared for my children. I really have no idea what's going on. And my main concern is, can you please tell me something about this? Can I get something other than reading it in the newspaper or having people tell me things? And thank you for your time, but I mean, I'm just very concerned and worried, and I don't want to go somewhere else with my children.
We, unfortunately, because it's not on the meeting agenda, we can't address it in the public meeting, but I can definitely ask Superintendent Glass to follow up with you directly. So our next public comment is from Madison Reed. Good evening.
I just have to put in a quick plug for Dr. Jensen. I heard she was removed as principal today, and she was one of the few redeeming things about the elementary school. Trust me when I say her talents are not going to go wasted. We just won't benefit, our district won't benefit from them anymore, which is truly a shame for those kids at the elementary school. Anne Rand said, if we don't fight for our country, who will? I'd like to challenge each of us, if we don't fight for our children, who will? This week, I withdrew my daughter from school. I had been toying with the idea already, and after the last board meeting, I felt there was really no other option. So why am I still here? To hold you accountable and again, encourage further evaluation of your operations, because until that happens, nothing will get better. Until there's work together with the community, progress can't happen. At the last meeting, I asked to speak candidly with you for a minute before starting the timer on my allotted 3 minutes, and was met with a hasty and slightly hostile no. I used some of my time to offer a solution to the board versus parent atmosphere set up at these meetings. Then went on with my planned comments where I pointed out how absurd it is that the board feels more accountable to government regulations and biased associations than you do to the parents when it's our children and our funds that run the district. As I concluded and went to walk away, Jill, you stopped me to speak candidly with me for a minute and informed me about a law restricting open communication between the board members and parents during the meeting. When I pressed a little and mentioned that a question and answer option had been mentioned before, you offered that it has to be requested through Kelly to be put on the agenda. Honestly, I don't know where to begin. Is it more ridiculous that you didn't offer the solution first, or that you technically broke this law to inform me of its existence, all while proving my point that the government has way too much power when there should be more genuine parental involvement instead? Or is it more ridiculous that instead of while listening to me and offer solutions and ask for your help, and thinking we need her on our side, she has energy, passion, motivation to do self-research and put time in, and she's looking to work with us. Instead, you sat there looking up a law you could quote to essentially tell me no. This board doesn't seem to have the right focus or attitude. You're a citizen board, and your purpose is to work with your community, the parents, to establish policy for our kids. Wendy also mentioned that she hopes I'm writing to my local political leaders, which I am, and I actively encourage others to do as well. I would like to challenge you, the governing board, to write to the local political leaders if you haven't already. Because the office you hold, you have a little more influence, especially when it comes to education. The focus on political policies for the sake of doing something is doing nothing. Let's talk resolutions, and it starts with an attitude of working with the community, not keeping us out. Quickly, in support of the bill to abolish the U.S. Department of Ed, the federal government has no place in education. Ronald Reagan introduced the plan to abolish it only a year after its establishment because he recognized it as a source of financial corruption. So much money gets stuck at the top. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Reed, first of all, informing you, or telling you that we can't talk to you candidly, that we can't have candid conversations. However, informing you of facts such as the open meeting law is definitely we're able to do that through the open meeting law. Just like the executive session that we held earlier is part of open meeting law. My suggestion that you read the open meeting law and understand it wasn't to have a candid conversation with you. It was to give you fact, which if you had read the open meeting law, you would also understand that that's part of it.
You missed the point of what I brought up, was that there just needs to be a meeting where parents can ask prepared questions.
And I
expect
suggested that you meet with Ms. Glass.
Yeah, after the fact, that's what I'm saying. That was
Because
my
your first
entire
conversation
approach.
was to ask if we could speak candidly, and we told you no.
All right, I'm just double checking because I have been known to have these comment cards stick together, so I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. It looks like this is our last one. Brian Paulson.
Hey there. Thanks for having us. I love the Anne Rand comment. So I have a preschooler and a kindergartner, and I have a nephew that's a preschooler and kindergartner. And we had the principal last year who I met and I liked a lot, and she's gone. Teachers are gone. Now, this year I just heard today that the principal of Dow Mountain Elementary is gone, and I don't know why, but I have a background in staffing. I've been doing it for 15 years, and this is the most difficult year I've ever seen for finding new staff. So if there is a reason, it better be a very good reason. Otherwise, it's just reckless, and I'm very worried there's not going to be anybody else, because it's almost impossible to find any employees right now. Personally, I've met Ms. Jensen briefly. I liked her. My wife is on the PTO. She volunteered on Friday and has had good things to say about her. But I know I've seen even districts that have low salaries can retain staff if they have a good environment and have a good administration. And that can happen. You can pull people away from districts that even have higher salaries. I honestly don't know what your salaries are, but it just makes me very concerned that we have no principal starting tomorrow for my son's school, and I'm worried about losing more teachers. And when I see something like so many staff members leaving, it makes me reflect and question on the leadership. And I hope the leadership is reflecting and thinking, what is the issue here? Thank you.
The next items on the agenda, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which includes donations on pages 42 through 48. Accounts payable vouchers are pages 49 through 61, payroll vouchers 62 through 66. The personnel action report, pages 67 and 16 through 69. And then approval of the 2021-22 robotics club for McDowell Elementary School. Are there any questions or comments about any items on the consent agenda? Other than there was a bearded dragon donated. That was pretty cool.
Mrs. Jenkins, before you approve the agenda, could I please introduce you to Jessica Kane? She is going to be, should you approve her, the new assistant principal at the high school. This is Jessica. Oh, okay. I'm like, hi.
No, you don't have to. Welcome. All right, if there aren't any other questions or comments, I will go ahead and move that we approve the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, the motion passes, and we are moving on to action items, the first of which is budget revision number 2. Superintendent Glass, do you have an intro for us on this topic?
So it's just that time of year that we need to do our budget revision. This is actually budget revision number 1. We did do an approval on a budget prior, but there was no change in the bottom line, so they didn't count that as a budget revision. So Ms. King is going to come up and share with you the budget revision, answer any of your questions. And again, this is just our standard budget revision. However, this one does include the increases that we received in July and the decreases that we received because of the aggregate spending limit.
Yeah, I remember that we discussed that those changes had come, they had taken effect too late for them to be included in the original budget, so we expected that they would be included as part of this revision.
Right.
We have it in front of us.
Yeah, they do have it in front of them. You can just
giving a few minutes tonight. So on the FY22 budget revision, just kind of wanted to go over real quick. Of course, you know the major funding for the district. Sorry, I'm sure. comes from the local property taxes and state aid. We fund the maintenance and operation, which is budget controlled fund, and that is what this revision is on. Then there's the district additional assistance. It used to be known as just simply capital. I don't know why somebody had to get fancy with it. It's still capital. But anyway, so both of those are formula driven. The formula comes with student counts, there's formulated weighted counts, there's a tax percentage of property values, and then various multipliers that are determined by different various government entities. We also have federal and state grants, and we've got the state propositions, particularly Prop 301, that is the Classroom Site Fund. In the past, we have had the Instructional Improvement Fund. This year, the Fountain Hills Unified School District is not receiving funds for the Instructional Improvement Fund. And then we've got some bonds that are out there. These usually pay for capital improvement projects as well as to pay off the interest and the principal on these bonds. So let's go on to the property tax on the variance between FY21 and FY22. Now, the only reason why I'm taking you back to this is because in the adopted budget public hearing that we did, we were still using FY21 numbers. So I thought it was important to just kind of touch base with what happened after we finished the adopted budget and then the legislature decided to finish their session. So, yeah. So the FY21 tax rate for FHUSD's budget was a 1.8371%. And for FY22, it has gone down to 1.7694. Now, this is not unusual. It's happened with other districts also. On the other hand, our property values have gone up. So the property values that we're working off of have gone up by 4.8%. So that helps to offset the 0.67% in the tax rate drop. Those are numbers released to us from Maricopa County. Alrighty. So now the fall surprise. We were so tickled when legislature finished in July. We thought, yay! Woo! You think it's Christmas for a second, and then somebody had fun and dropped the aggregate budget by 16.09%, not 6%, not 10%, 16.09. Who does that? So we did that to my family budget. There'd be issues. So on top of that, the legislature, well, they can opt to stop these cuts if they get together and get on the same page before March 1st. We can always cross our fingers. Okay, so until then, we're just going to move forward with a very conservative approach to our M&O expenditure budget. It's not going to make much difference to a lot of the other budgets. And again, we were using FY21 numbers when I made this budget. So the actual changes to this budget have been very minimal. The changes to the M&O budget literally only went down under $2,000. It was the $750 on the capital side that hit a little bit, but we have a really good capital reserve, so that part, we didn't feel that either. Now, I did want to talk real quick about the total student count that we are working with. On the adopted budget, it was 1,170. On the budget revision, it's 1,172. That is based off of end of October, beginning of November numbers, because those are the numbers that ABE requested me to use for this particular submission. Then we have the total weighted student count, which you can see there. Oh, and I see I did a typo and didn't give you the correct weighted student count for revision number 1, but it's in the budget itself, so anyone here, it's public record, so we can certainly make sure the link is up on the site within a couple of days. Let's see, additional considerations, the Arizona State Retirement System increased the employee as well as employer matching rates from 12.22% in 21 to 12.41% in FY22. And then the alternate contribution rate also went up. On other adjustments, the Prop 301 really benefited by everyone staying home and shopping online. So we not only got a normal property tax, but we got an increase of up to $733 per weighted student count. And again, that is a one-time only, because I doubt anyone's going to continue to purchase like they did when COVID first hit and we all had to stay at home.
Inflation multiplier, 1.21% for this year of FY22. All right, so the base level amount with teacher compensation increased to $4,445.53, or a 1.97% increase. Let's take a quick look. I will let you get on with your meeting. The overall review, you're going to see that there's the function on the overall review. You've got the function coding on the one side. You've got salary, benefits, purchase services, and supplies on the other. Basically, M&O is your operating costs. So for anyone that's not familiar with school district funding, when we say M&O, maintenance and operation, we're basically referencing the general fund. So the general fund is taking care of mostly our salary and benefits. We do have 4 certified staff. We also have federal and state grants that help offset some of those costs. And we also have the wonderful classroom site fund to also help offset those costs, as well as to provide some bonuses to our teaching staff. When you are looking at numbers on the auditor's site and you see that they give you that nice little pie shape and they tell you, okay, this district has so much going to payroll, this so much has so much to the classroom, so much to this, so much to that. When I talked with the Auditor General, just to find out how the coding works for them, they are looking at numbers 1,000, 2,100, and 2,200. That is how they determine how much money benefits the actual classroom in any one district. The 2,300 through 2,500, that would include your administration, so that includes the district board, as well as the superintendent's office. That includes the principals and assistant principals, and it includes the business office and IT. Now, the reason I wanted to spell that out is because you're going to see that in this particular budget, that the 2,300 is a little bit high on purchase services. It's higher than it normally is. The reason being, we did an election, okay? So all of the election costs and related costs, we are required by the Arizona auditor to put it under 2,300, which then makes it look like, 2,300, yeah, just bought a bunch of purchase services. Well, yes, for the 2 elections we did. Okay. Now, facilities, you're going to be talking with John later, and as you know, we've got some repairs out there that need to be done. So you're going to see the purchase services up at about a little over $800,000. The supplies for that is going to be right just under $400,000. And then for transportation, we've got that $226,000 on supplies. Now, keep in mind that's working with some really older vehicles, and so. But it's still cheaper at this point for us to replace a transmission than to replace a bus. So that's where that's at. I did want to just break down real quick. We do have a breakdown on the payroll. When you include it with the benefits from the classroom site fund, we're at about 56% is going strictly to the actual classroom. And then we have the 12% and 11% that are helped taking up the rest of the so the student support services, as well as your principals and your staff there. So purchase services just kind of broke it down so that you could see, yes, facilities is working hard to make sure that everything keeps moving. I do want to point out facilities has a lot of fixed costs to it. Now, what do I mean by fixed costs? What I mean is you've got a lot of your utilities, all of your water, all of the electricity. We've got the landscaping, well, it's not really a fixed, it's kind of a little bit variable, but you're with me on that. We've got sewer, we've got trash. Since we did start our old landscaping group, we took it in rather than continuing to pay for a vendor. We do have like cost of bins, some of the startup costs are seen in that. Okay, so things to remember, budgets in public education are subject to change. Everything's subject to change. It seems like in this COVID environment, they're really subject to change. We are very heavily influenced by macro and micro economies because we are literally paid by taxpayers. So we're a government entity. We're influenced by macro and micro. We're also influenced by federal policy, and the multipliers are controlled by state and local government. With FHUSD's budget, we will continue to adjust as these elements are outside of our control. What we can control, we can approach this environment as an exciting challenge. I'll tell you it is every day.
We can face this challenge as one team made up by several players, and each of us have our own position and our own role to play, and in that, we're learning how to support each other and just move forward. So, there you go. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Before questions, I just want to make sure that Krista notes that Dr. Barnard rejoined the board. Thank you. So yes, any comments or questions for Ms. King? Other than great job. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, the next action item on the agenda is adoption of the sexual education curriculum. Superintendent Glass, do you have an intro for us on this? I will say as you're pulling your pages up that I know that we had our two different readings. Now I can't remember what they're termed, but you know, it was on the board agenda twice, public hearings for the topic of the sex ed curriculum.
First, did you vote on the budget?
Oh, sorry, I forgot that it was an action item and we need to vote on it, not an informational report. Thank you. Yes, let's back up. I need to find my budget page. Oh, okay, so I will go ahead and make a motion that we approve the budget revision 1. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the budget revision 1, please say aye. No, it says 2, but it was actually 1. It was a misprint in the, but thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we can proceed with the sexual education action item. Thank you for catching that for us. Thank you.
Yes, we did have the 2 hearings and the 60-day review of the curriculum, as well as received 2 pieces of feedback regarding the curriculum. And it was actually not focused on that there was anything significantly deficit to the curriculum that we're currently using. So we'd like to recommend that we continue to use the curriculum that we have in the scope and sequence that the staff is currently using, and that we'll have a committee to review current practices in sex ed and use the 2 pieces of feedback that we received during that committee meeting to either improve or change the curriculum.
Any questions or comments regarding that? Right, do we have a motion? Well, then I will go ahead and move that the board adopt the sexual education curriculum as written and presented to the board in public hearings held October 6, 2021 and November 10, 2021. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion passes. Our next item, let me get back to my main agenda page and board packet. We have some lovely policies to cover regarding resignations of certified staff members. So policy GCQC, this is in regards to Melissa Miller's resignation. We have information on our packet on pages 86 through 89. So we need to discuss and take action regarding the request of resignation as well as the waiver of liquidated damages from Melissa Miller. Does anybody have, we have additional information in our board packet to support this request for the waiver of liquidated damages fee. Does the board have any questions for Superintendent Glass or any comments?
Mrs. Jenkins, I do recommend the approval of the resignation and the approval of the waiver.
I think that that would be appropriate in light of additional information the board has received today. Yes. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that the board approve the resignation of Melissa Miller, kindergarten teacher, along with waiving the $1,500 liquidated damage.
Second.
We We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. We next have the policy GCQC resignation of certified staff member Nicole Moreno. This is on pages 90 and 91. All right, so for this one, the administration recommends the board discuss and take action regarding a request of resignation for Nicole Moreno. There is no waiver for liquidated damages at this time, so it is just the resignation request itself. Any questions or discussion? Okay, I will go ahead and move that the board approve the resignation request for Nicole Moreno. We have the motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We now have, yes, again, policy GCQC, resignation of certified staff member Irina Evans. This is on pages 92 through 93. Correct, so it's just the resignation. Any questions, comments, or discussion? Okay. I will go ahead and move that the board approve the resignation request for Irina Evans. We have the motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition, the motion passes. Our last of this grouping for policy GCQC is resignation of certified staff member Rita Brello. This is pages 94 through 95. No, there is no request for a waiver, so this is just the resignation. Any discussion or questions from the board on this resignation? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we accept the resignation. A second.
We have the motion and the second. All those in favor of accepting the resignation of Rita Brello, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, so the motion passes. We now have on the agenda information discussion items, beginning with the superintendent evaluation. It references some page numbers here, but that's just our superintendent evaluation instrument. I will say for the members of the audience present, the executive session that we had before the regular board meeting this evening was our superintendent evaluation. The way the superintendent evaluation is conducted is that each of the board members is given an evaluation instrument to essentially rate the superintendent across multiple criteria and then also provide our open feedback, strengths, weaknesses, areas of improvement, and such. We discussed that in executive session because it is a personnel item. So we did meet and convene and discuss how each of the individuals, board members had scored the superintendent and how that was gathered as a whole. And that will be utilized for our determining of the superintendent's performance pay at the end of this year. Anything else that anybody would like to contribute? Dana, did you, I couldn't tell if you raised your finger okay. All right, so then we'll move on to the facilities discussion. Mr. Flynn is going to provide us some information about Superintendent Glass. Do you have an introduction for us?
Yes. So we have been discussing the Gordian report. Mr. Flynn shared that with you over a month ago, and we've discussed the significant needs of several of our facilities, to include the possible closure of one of our schools. Mr. Flynn and I sat, and Mr. Flynn, I do have this for you if you need it, and wrote out our proposed timeline. We also, as you can see, received the breakdown by site for how much it costs us to run each site administratively through the facilities, with utilities and all of the things that are entailed. So Mr. Flynn is here to answer any of your questions and discuss timeline with you.
I do have an initial question looking at the operational costs that we were provided. And perhaps we've had some mention of this previously and it's just escaping me. But the thing that stands out to me the most from this first page is, you know, for the most part, as we look at the three different school sites, McDowell Mountain, the middle school, and the high school, those sites essentially get progressively larger in terms of the size of the building, and so then and the size of the campus, and so it's like, okay, as you move up, you expect that the cost to kind of increase because you're looking at a larger building footprint. But when I look at the utilities column, the middle school is quite a bit higher than the high school. So I'm just curious what the deal is with that. Do we have like envelope issues there? Like what is the main driver of the fact that the utility cost is so much higher at a smaller site than it is at the high school?
That's a great question. First of all, Madam President, Madam Superintendent, board members, thanks for having me here. To answer the question about the middle school, the primary driver for utilities, we break our utilities down into, I think, 4 different areas, including trash, electricity, water, and I'm forgetting the 4th one. But the big driver of the middle school is water. And that's where we have all of our grass fields, that's where we water the fields. We just went through, if you look at it month by month, you'll see that in the months of September, October, and the beginning of November, we spent the most amount of money. And the reason we spent the most amount of money on utilities, water being one of those components, is because this is the time of year where we overseed and prepare the fields for next year. This is the first year since I've been in charge of facilities that we're taking a holistic approach to doing this as opposed to piecemealing and doing it at the last minute. So that's where the driver is there for the middle school. It's really water when you look at it. In terms of electricity, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe that building is as efficient as the high school is in terms of energy usage per square foot.
Before you go on that item, if we built middle school budget-wise, we weren't able to put children in like we have in high school, which has saved us a lot of money over the years. Is that an issue when it comes to efficiency at the middle school compared to high school?
That's a great question. This is going back 2 years ago when we engaged another company to come in and look at some of our assets. The current system that we use at the middle schools is inefficient and outdated. The chiller system needs to go. When you break it down into component usage, lighting, electrical sockets, motors, and then what drives and variable drives that drive our chiller system is totally inefficient. So one of the things that we're looking at in the Gordian proposal is replacing and taking out the chiller unit and replacing all of the air conditioning units, which are currently up on the roof and sit over each classroom or each space, replacing those with what's commonly referred to as single pack units, which operate on their own. They're far more efficient, don't require any water, don't require any chiller. They all have their own variable speed drive in them, much smaller package, and just eliminating taking the chiller plant at the middle school out.
You wouldn't have replaced it when you take it out, just change regular.
Yeah, so it would be, if you can imagine the air conditioning unit you got sitting outside of your house, it would be an air conditioning unit, not a heat exchange unit, that would sit up on the ceiling and provide, comfort or cooling and heating to that particular classroom or space. And in some cases, there would be multiple units, like in the gym and some of the team rooms, there would be multiple units. Supplying comfort to those areas.
Going back to the water, do you remember how much it cost to put the turbine?
How much to put the grass turf in?
And track.
You know about this year, what the cost is this
No,
year?
when we initially put the turf in, does anybody remember what the cost was?
For the middle school?
No, for the high school.
Oh, for the high school. Again, I'm working on memory here,
Yeah.
but I believe it was between 1.2 and 1.3 million dollars.
And how,
That's correct, and included in the new track.
the new track, right? And
Yeah, that did include, you're correct, it did include the new tracks.
and was that 9 years ago? Was that
Yeah.
done?
Yeah.
8 years? It's when we did the bond. I guess my point is.
It was 2013, 14, that they made the change.
So about 8 years ago. I guess my point is that, you know, we're spending $40,000, give or take some, more at the middle school than we do at the high school in water. And so I just wondered, you know.
It'll take a long time for us to make it work.
Right, the
You know,
turf.
$1 million.
Well, and especially now, the turf's only 8 years old and already needs replacement. So that was one of the things that when the turf got approved, that was one of the selling points, was the saving of the water.
It did.
It did, not cost effectively.
$1 million.
Right, I don't, so,
Without, it's more than just the water to the field.
Sure,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we
There's
also
other
have,
maintenance aspects, correct?
just,
right.
with the lines on the field once during the season, so at the end of last game, you couldn't see any lines, the referees just kind of guessed where they were.
Yeah.
And then we had to mow it and make
No,
all
but
the
I think
trucks.
that was one of the selling points, was the cost savings of the water. So I just wondered how cost effective it really was.
Well, we did a study on it, and in 5 or 6 years, it paid for itself. So we've actually got our money's worth.
again, I'm not real familiar with those numbers, but, you know, looking back and you know, using my best guess, I would say that the field did pay for itself in terms of water and fertilizing and overseeding and all of that. The disappointment is the field hasn't lasted long.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a direct result of nobody taking care of it.
Well, that's what happened in the first track.
Right, they didn't take care of it. So that's why where we're at right now. On a positive note, I'm starting to get some feedback in terms of magnitude of cost to, you know, replace that field now. That cost is almost 1/3 of what it was before. And we're working with a company that's worked with, you know, the European soccer leagues, the NFL, Major League Baseball, and you know, we're working with some of the unique solutions they have to replace these fields for less money and quickly. So I think last time we did it, it was like a 4 or 5 month process, and that's considering that we already had infrastructure in place for drainage and everything else, for the most part. But now we're looking at, if we get it all lined up right, we could be done in 10 days. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where I'm trying, again, I know we've not decided we're gonna spend the money, but, you know, as I go through the planning process, I'm trying to shoehorn it in between the last day that they need to be on the field for soccer, assuming they go all the way to the state championship, and when is the first competition that we need the track for. Because, you know, I've been assured that we can still use the track and practice on the track and do all that. It doesn't impact their ability to change over the field. So. And I did speak to somebody, they did this with the New England Patriots twice in the last 9 years, and I spoke to the person who's the field manager of the Patriots, and he said it's just incredible. You know, they played a Monday night game. As soon as the game was over, the tractors were out there. They brought out the new carpet, rolled it right over the old carpet, and they were facing $1 million a day in liquidated damages. They were more than 10 days. 8 days later, they were done and off the field. I've done that twice for them, and he said that he said that the cost savings and everything was incredible. The one thing about our field compared to some of the other fields is just the amount of use that it gets as well. Again, not an excuse for not taking care of the field, But, between high school, the various high school sports, PE that use the field, as well as middle school sports using the field does get a lot of use. So, again, disappointed that we didn't get more life out of it, but I think that it has served us well.
Yeah, I hope the plan would be to set us up with a more regular and recurring maintenance schedule to ensure our investment is better protected.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. The good thing is, or the positive thing there is, we have most of those tools already in place to do that. It's just for whatever reason, it was never part of an annual plan. And when I came, this year was the first year that I was in charge of everything. I was out there raking and dumping and dumping. And you know what? All I was doing was pulling out more of the fiber on the thing, and it just made no sense at all to keep doing it. So we do have tools in place already that we purchased with the initial field that we can maintain.
If memory serves me right, there was the hope that it would generate some revenue. We could have tournaments there, soccer tournaments and football and different clinics and all of these different things that, would offset some of those costs.
And again, I wasn't here when that's a great idea. I think we could still do that. For whatever reason, I know that we had the solid games, the Native American games from the state were here. We hosted 3A and 4A playoff games here. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was the previous administration chose to not extend that offer. So whatever revenue we did have coming in, it stopped. But yeah, the field could be used, as a revenue generator. There's no doubt about it. And when you look again at the continued savings in terms of water, grass, and overseeding and fertilizer and all that, plus the revenue, this field will pay for itself quicker than the previous field did.
All right, let's get back to kind of our point of focus here, although it is good to hear the updates about what is potential for the field at high school. But regarding kind of the main part of the facilities discussion regarding possible school closure. So we also have, I guess, a memorandum here that provides us with a proposed timeline for that. And timelines for preparing the high school for 6th through 8th grade students, and then moving the actual move of the 6th through 8th grade students over to the high school, and then moving pre-K through 3rd grade to the middle school location. So this gives us a timeline through 2025 right now. Can you walk us through, I mean, I know we have it here, but can you walk us through a little bit, the reasoning behind the timeline, and why you would anticipate it taking until 2025 to fully complete this activity?
Right. So the genesis for me on closing McDowell Mountain began actually 3 years ago. I mentioned that, it was time to really evaluate the space. And that's when I was acting sort of as a facilities facilitator and just walking around and helping out on various projects. A consultant, well paid. I realized that it's, first of all, it's a charming school. My youngest daughter went to school there. When I'm there and I see the students, they just fit into that space. They're so, cute, adorable is the right word. They fit in that space. But the reality is that when you look at what it actually costs to operate it per square foot, I would argue taking the water and some of the utilities out the size of the other buildings, just go per square foot, it's the most expensive building we need to operate. When you look at the Gordian assessment of what's required to bring the schools up to 21st century standards that we'd like to bring them up to, we're looking at anywhere between $4 and $5 million for that building alone. I can tell you that there's not gonna be a large appetite for school facilities board to do a lot of that work. Because of the age of the building and so forth, and now there's parameters on what we can and can't do based on square footage that they've paid for in the past, and whatever formula they use to determine that. So, it's a pretty expensive proposition to continue to operate the building and to bring it up to what I consider 21st century standards for education. So that's the genesis, right? You look at it, you say, I love it. Again, I'm tied to it emotionally because of my my youngest daughter and everything else. But the reality is, one of the things that I feel like I'm charged with is to determine or suggest when I see something that needs to be done. And again, this isn't new for me. This is 3 years old. There's no doubt that the building is going to cost a lot, and I think that given our current population, student population, given the growth estimates for the population, given the fact that we have all of these other vacant resources in buildings that are newer, where if we're going to spend money, bond money, or any other capital override that we have, I think we should be spending in these newer buildings. To give you an example of 2 buildings, right, that we potentially would have mothballed. 4 Peaks would be the next building I would occupy, not McDowell Mountain. So 4 Peaks is even though it sat in mothballs now for more than 9 years, is still in better shape and would require less money to bring back to 21st century standards. So that's the genesis. Does that help?
Yes.
With some background. So, if I could snap my fingers and go back 3 years ago when I had this conversation with Rob, I would have snapped my fingers and convinced Rob immediately that tomorrow we would close McDowell Mountain and move on, because it's better just to get it over with and get it done. But there was just no appetite for it, and I understand why. I mean, this is not being critical, there was no appetite for that at that time. So with that being said, the plan that we've looked at from 10,000 feet is to take McDowell Mountain and move it to the middle school and create 2 different campuses there. One for, I'm going to get this wrong. It's going to be 4th and 5th grade, and then K through 3 there. We would take 6th through 8th grade, move it over to the high school, which ironically is where it was at one point to begin with. We've talked about, again, snapping our fingers and being able to do it tomorrow. That cost, I think, is prohibitive. We're probably looking between $2.5 to $3 million just to get it done by, let's say, this time next year. So when you look at, doing this right, and making sure that we work through the process and develop whatever vision we have for however we're going to move forward, it just makes more sense to do it, I think, over a longer period of time. Again, I am the guy that wants to snap his fingers and get it done tomorrow. So,
And you're telling us, slow down.
I'm telling me, slow down. Right? And yeah, I think that in discussions I've had with Kelly, I made that clear, that we need to do this right if we're going to do it. So at the end of the day, it's still going to be a lot of money. So the plan would initially be to move to prepare the high school to receive the 6th through 8th graders. And there's not a lot of, again, I don't want to minimize the work, but there's not a lot of dollar work that needs to be done to do that, because the campus was already set up for separation between those grades. There are some additional security measures we would take, but those are already planned, and we're moving forward with some of those now. But there are some challenges. We need to improve the gym and put locker rooms back in to the old gym, the older gym at the high school. We need to relocate the training facility somewhere else after we've spent some money there, because we don't want students sharing locker rooms between the younger kids and the older kids. That's not a good idea. as far as security goes, most of that's already in place. We need upgrades to fences and gates and so forth. So that move, while it sounds simple, it's still gonna take some time to get done, and we're not gonna have that done in time for next year.
Yeah, and I would say, just, for the benefit of the audience, so that they can hear some of the items that go into that process and what else would need to be considered in the planning, right? We're not just talking about moving students, we'd be moving the administrative staff from the middle school as well. And so they would need to have office space at the high school campus that would be separate than we're not gonna have the high school principal and the middle school principal sharing office, right? So we need to set up separate office space, because we do have some vacant, or I shouldn't say vacant necessarily, but not fully utilized space in terms of classrooms at the high school, but since they haven't been used in a number of years, they need technology upgrades to be suitable for us to be able to provide the education and learning that we want to in students in those buildings. There's, the pieces that you mentioned for the gym, but then also cafeteria and lunch, and now we'd be bringing in more students, and we wouldn't necessarily want the sixth graders mixing and having lunch at the same time as the high school students in the exact same space. And then other specials outside of just gym, but music and art, and what space would be utilized for those 6th and 8th grade students. So there are a lot of things. It's not just like have the kids pick up and take their books and walk into a different classroom.
You're right. There's essentially 3 components to this. So there's the planning and architectural phase, where we do the design work and decide on what we want from the space, the combined space. Next is, where do we put all the pieces, right, which is part of the planning phase. Then after that is the construction, the upgrade phase, which includes all of that stuff. And then finally, going on in the background is how we matriculate all these kids into the schools to use the gyms and the cafeterias and lunch periods and all of that. So, yes, I think you encapsulated all of that fine. And that's going to be the case in each building other than McDowell Mountain, which, the proposal shows that it would be shuttered. So we wouldn't be spending any money.
Yeah, some additional things though at the middle school campus to make it suitable for our younger students would involve bathroom retrofits, because we need to have appropriate size like toilets and sinks for kindergartners. That's different than an 8th grader, and appropriate playground equipment and other aspects like that.
So, right, so if you move into year 2, in year 2, the 6th through 8th graders have moved over to the high school. Now there's this vacant space that they've left. And it's not only all the things that you mentioned, but how do we now take the opportunity to reconfigure the middle school in terms of who goes where, so that that's a more efficient process and separates the students and all of that. Once that decision's made, then you go back into the design phase. And you're right, some of the biggest challenges we have are with moving the kids over there, because obviously our kindergartners are not going to use the same toilets and urinals that the older kids use, and we don't have those facilities there currently for them to use. That would include drinking fountains. How do we efficiently move them around so that they can comfortably and safely travel from whatever they're doing for their specials, whether they're going to art or music or out to the playground or whatever. How do we meld them in for lunchtime and all that? Those are all the things that we'll do in the planning phase, and the design, the architectural phase. But that's going to take a year. There is no doubt that that's going to take a year, and I'll be pulling my hair out toward the end. Whatever I can grab, I'll be pulling it out because we'll be up against it, and it'll be sleepless nights just trying to get that done. So, but once that's done, then the middle school is ready to receive in year 3. The kids from McDowell Mountain would move over, and then we would shutter McDowell Mountain currently. My idea, again, if I could sound my fingers, is everybody would move, and the next day there'd be a beautiful park there to replace those buildings, so that we could live with the sad memory that we're no longer using it. But it will leave us with 2 buildings that are essentially not being used, and then we have to make a decision. There's so many considerations, even with what we do with buildings are empty now, so that we can use them effectively and efficiently, and again, look to the future and plan on all kinds of contingencies and so forth. So.
And you and Superintendent Glatz are still working on the pro forma for Four Peaks to analyze whether it's, best for us to continue to try to operate that as like a business accelerator, business hub.
The cash flow part, the pro forma is done. And my printer didn't work the day I came in, but it was very difficult to express what the pro forma showed, which is even currently, the current residents that or tenants that we have in and renting out the rest of the building, bringing the current tenants up to the current rate, that we're not going to make money on this proposition. And
Well, and I mean, we're not in it to like make a ton of revenue, but we need to just cover operating costs. So if we're not covering operating costs, that's really the decision for us.
Correct. I know we're not in the business of making money. But again,
It would be nice if we could, but.
Right. Yeah. The answer is, yeah, we're losing money. It's a losing proposition for us, and I don't think we should be in that business. And I would say, with all due respect to everybody, is if we're going to continue to have this relationship with the town, which I think is positive, the town needs to assume responsibility for whatever building we give them, and they need to take care of it, knowing what they know.
Yeah, about the.
They use the space themselves, so they know the challenges we have.
Does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
I'll take the next hour.
What?
I was around when they built Dow Mountain,
Right.
the next door, pretty much. So I'm well aware of how that was built. And we at that time had a 4 Peaks facility. Prior to that, we had a couple warehouse spaces, so I go back a long way in Palm Hills. But I'm going to take the opposite view a little bit and say, let's look at our population and our school enrollment projections over the next 10 years and further out. When we built this facility, and with the additions that we put on a few years after we opened it, it was designed to hold 1,400 students. That's more than we have in the district today. So technically, we could move all of our students into this facility. Now, I agree that it isn't ready for that yet. But there's no projections that the town or we have had that show us growing. The town is getting to be a retirement community, a high-end retirement community, which makes it more difficult for families to move in. So our projections show that we'll be somewhere around 1,100 or 1,200 students in 5 or 6 years. So looking at how we allocate funds for those students, I'm under the, I've been doing this for a long time now. Yeah. The classroom is where everything happens. Whether you've got neat things going on in the play yard and all that kind of stuff, it's the classroom that draws students and their families here. So I want to make sure that if we're going to invest money in upgrading things like at the middle school and so forth, that if we look at the alternative use of that money, that we could do a better job of paying our faculty if we didn't have the Dow Mountain and for 4 Peaks. Whether or not we get any value out of those properties or not is not the issue. We also have 3 undeveloped areas in town that we own.
That's correct.
That can only generate one-time funds for the most part, unless we do something outside the box, but we're not talking about millions and millions of dollars in that regard. So I just want to make sure, I understand the timeline that you have, but it does not overlook the fact that we're going to have a student to square footage ratio at both the middle school and high school that are well underneath any other school district in the state that I know of, especially in the valley. So are we using more money to maintain a facility that's too big really for what we need, as opposed to paying teachers more and really getting what we really are here for, which is the best education for our students? So I get what you're put together here, but I think we have to spend more time really making sure that the money that we're investing in facilities is the money that we are taking away from the classroom, knowing that. And if we're not doing it right, then let's step back and let's look ahead 10 years, to make sure that the investment we make now, it doesn't, we don't throw it away 10 years from now.
Right. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That's why I said we need to slow down and make sure that we do this right. And I don't disagree with you that the high school is designed for 1,400 or 1,500 students. As a practical matter, I just don't know how you put K through 12 in the current configuration. Because if we do that, at some point we still have to use the middle school fields. Yeah, there's all those questions that have to be answered, but I don't disagree with if we're going to do this, money should go back into the classroom.
We know there are people in the audience who went to school when we had that situation. And this was, it was 7th and 8th, not 6th, 7th, and 8th here. You know, it worked. We had to share a lot of things. We had the small gym, the big gym. And shortly after we opened up, the small gym flooded, and we ended up with what you would say an older gym, but it's the same age. Again, I just want us to spend more time and talk about things going forward much more in depth than what we were able to in a short period of time. And I also want to make sure that we have people from the community involved in this whole process, not just from the district itself, but somebody from the town of Palm Hills, because they have an interest in what we do as much as anybody in this audience, because they represent all of them. Now, I gave the superintendent something that we paid for in 1986, which is a projection of our school needs, facility-wise. It projected the town population at 40,000, and that included the 2 sections north of town. It gave us an enrollment of over 3,000 to 4,000, and that didn't happen, obviously. But in that process, I think we need to look at that more closely in fact. Losing my voice, I'm a teacher all day. That we need to really make sure that the community is involved. And I've been here for 40 years, and I see the difference in the makeup of the community. I was the average age when I got here. 40 years later, I'm still the average age. We got some math people on here. So I'm not quite the average age. So I appreciate what you've done, but I don't think this is done yet. I think we have to start combining not only the cost of operating the facility, but the cost of the faculty and staff that we need to maintain the quality of education that we have. Maybe we don't need a second principal at the middle school or the high school, whatever. If our enrollment is going to be, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 90 to 100 students in a typical class, there's other needs that we could incorporate that would make things run more smoothly by allocating those funds over 1 or 2 facilities instead of 3. So anyway, I could go on because I've been here too long and I'm really invested in this. I want to make sure that what we do in the future makes more sense.
I think if we made it a 2-person meeting between you and I, we'd be here for a couple of weeks.
Well, we first started talking about this in the press box, if you remember.
I remember that. I don't disagree with you. We talked about starting this conversation after winter break, and I really pushed that let's start it now. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and start to have this conversation now. I know that my view is somewhat myopic because I look at it from a facility standpoint, cost, efficiency, security, and all of that. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that we do is educate our students to be the best students they can be and be a great school district. And I just wanted to start this conversation. It's really important to me. Are there any other questions?
I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit too. I'm curious who's on part of the planning phase, and I would also, I guess it's really a rhetorical question, because my hope would be that it would be all stakeholders, from the town to teachers to everyone, and being as transparent as possible throughout the process so nobody is surprised.
Right.
So that would be my hope. So it's not really a question.
I would echo that as well. I think that this is such an important decision that, using the corporate analogy, it can't be just the board of directors and the management team making this decision. It needs to be everybody. It needs to be the people who fit into Dana's demographic, my demographic, the demographic of the parents and students we have. We need to have that conversation and, for lack of a better term, knuckle it out and decide, what's in the best interest of the district going forward. So I agree.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we didn't want to get started today on the movement of the students in the building, cleaning out the buildings, is because we were able to get some feedback about when Four Peaks was closed and the difficulty that caused and the lack of communication in that area. And we wanted to make sure that we did communicate, that questions were able to be asked and answered to the best of our ability. And we wanted just the rest of this year to take that opportunity to get that feedback and to share the information that we have.
Again, not a question, but I didn't see libraries on this list, and I think that's a critical thing that needs to be considered, because I've been in that high school library, and I'm no middle school or a downtown library.
There are little cozy
No,
Dr. Barr, I was walking some people around at the schools the other day, and I said the same thing in each of the buildings. These libraries need to be repurposed in 21st century and all that, so yeah.
Kindles, whatever. Okay, the question that hasn't been asked yet, and I'm concerned about, is the lease versus what we own. Aren't we leasing the lands that the middle school is on? And yet we own the lands that our other schools are on.
All right, I've looked into that. As far as I can tell,
Dana's the one that's saying it, so I can't believe you didn't, yeah.
I've looked into that, and as far as I can determine from speaking to people, we actually do own the land. There's part of the land that we do lease, but the majority of the land that we sit on, we own.
Yeah.
That's
The
my.
middle school is all leased land.
All right, well.
That's the.
So that's a question we have to get into. We do have to determine what the answer is, because I called and spoke to somebody and they said, no, a portion of the land is leased by the district, but the exact comment was the land that you sit on, you own.
Yeah, you need to see the lease agreement. I helped negotiate that back in the day.
Do you have it in any real file?
I probably
Because
do
that would be
somewhere,
helpful.
yeah. I've moved a couple times since then, it's probably done. But either way, we do own more land except for 2 acres than any other entity in town. So whether we can sell that land, and the 3 parcels, we need to have a vote public to sell it. The 2 parcels, the middle school and McDowell Mountain, we can repurpose it with the town if we want to, or we can lease it. There's lots of opportunities there potentially, but bottom line is we're spending money on 4 Peaks, and we're spending money on McDowell right now when we don't need the space. We need the facility enhancements, but that money could be better spent in the classroom.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I will say though that, I want to make sure that we, as much as I also want to see us to stop spending money at sites that really don't make sense for us to continue to operate, I do want to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan and we take the time to do it properly, because I don't want to see there to be any shortcuts or trade-offs that would not give what's in the best interest of our students and our staff, right? Like, I don't want us to say, oh, we can accelerate this because we just won't put in the recess equipment until 6 months later, and we'll just send kids to that site and they won't have recess. Because honestly, there's as much important social and emotional learning that happens at recess as there is in the classroom as well. And I don't think any parent of like a 7-year-old is gonna tell you that it's okay for their kid to not have recess for 6 months.
Again, I don't disagree with you at all. So again, I think when you cut this down, this meeting is for Dana and I to come together and slow this process down. So I appreciate it very much.
All right.
Because I think, Dana, you were on the same page, let's get this over with. It's just.
I kind of still am, but just so you know that.
Me too. That's why I come to this group meeting, that people tell me that I need to slow down.
All right, are there any other questions or comments from the board? Well, thank you, John, for your time, which I'm sure will be the first of many discussions.
No worries, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody that showed up tonight at the every board meeting, so.
Thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda is the presentation on student data, IXL and STAR reading. And is that dovetailed as like Naviance, like, because Naviance is listed as a separate agenda item, but are they just presenting it all as like one?
So he'll just they'll do the data presentation, which is part of our assessment system. So we've done IXL and at all of the schools, K-12, and STAR reading, which is part of the Move On When Reading requirement for the state. We have to have a specific assessment. So Chris and Mr. Alexander and Mr. Markle are going to share the data, and then Mr. Alexander can move into Naviance, which is separate. It's called Career Planning and Prep Tool, and Mr. Alexander will share that with you.
Good evening, everyone. Like Dr. Glass said, Mr. Markle and myself will be talking and presenting on where our schools are currently at with IXL and STAR reading. And before I kind of jump in, just to kind of give you an idea of why we're doing this. One, after coming out of the pandemic and even during the pandemic, one of the big things that in education in general, not just here in Fountain Hills, we needed to see where exactly our students are. We need to meet them where they are. And IXL and STAR allow us to measure exactly where they are, where their deficits are. If we have students above grade level, below grade level, where they're supposed to be. And IXL also and STAR provides opportunities for enrichment as well as reteaching possibilities and remediation. So the data that you'll see tonight will reflect, in essence, where our students are, mainly in math and English, although in IXL we utilize this at the elementary and middle schools for all 4 core subject areas. So what is IXL? IXL is personalized learning. It's custom built for Arizona academic standards. It's catered just for our state. Math, ELL, skill plans unpack every standard in the targeted areas, so teachers know exactly what students should work on, when they should work on it, and to meet benchmarks. IXL provides real-time diagnostics. The data that you'll see was taken over the course of the semester, although there were diagnostic tests initially given at the beginning of the year. Mr. Mark will talk about how specifically at each school they're all doing it the same, but there's a beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year diagnostic that students will take to show growth or regression potentially. But as students actually work on it, students assign questions and assignments, you'll actually see that diagnostic sort of fluctuate based off of their progress. Comprehensive curriculum, there are 8,000 different skills to support students. Actionable analytics, they support the students' delivery of data, so the teachers can actually analyze their classroom data to see exactly where their students lie. And we'll talk a little bit more about the benefits to both our teachers as well as our students a little bit later on. And then it also provides personalized guidance, meaning that the action plans are for individualized students. And we can also provide differentiation for individual students as well. So how are we utilizing this in the classroom? All of our schools are utilizing IXL to assist in helping students close any learning gaps brought on by the pandemic, as well as increase their knowledge base. Primarily, again, it's going to be used for enrichment and remediation, as well as the growth of students that are found at current grade level. McDowell Mountain, as well as the middle school, are currently using IXL in all 4 core subject areas. With the high school, their sole focus is on math and English language arts. These areas are going to help prepare students for state assessments in the future, And they're also part of a new assessment system of our beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, again, to show growth. So how does IXL help our teachers become even better at what they do? Again, it provides enrichment and remediation lessons for students, for our teachers, so they don't have to, reinvent the wheel. They're right there and they can plug them in. They assist teachers in meeting students where they are at currently, so we can meet their needs. They place students in similar ability levels as well into learning groups for differentiation. So I didn't have a screenshot of this, but if you go into certain aspects of IXL in a teacher's classroom, it'll actually group them in groups 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it has them by ability level, so students can actually work collaboratively together on certain activities, and again, it's meeting where they're at, it's providing differentiation, which if you spend time in a classroom, that's a pretty hard skill to master, even if you're a veteran teacher. So providing our teachers with an avenue to provide differentiation for our students is really a key selling point for IXL. And then finally, it allows teachers to work more efficiently and effectively. Their time is extremely valuable, and they're all the time trying to squeeze in as much instruction as possible and meet all the standards that are required to prepare students to move on to the next grade level, as well as the end-of-year assessments, and this streamlines that process a little bit for them. And then how does IXL help our students? It provides enrichment and remediation, as we talked about with the teachers. It provides them to reach proficiency, and mastery, which leads to deeper understanding of concepts and accelerating their growth. It also extends learning opportunities. IXL, there's a lot of data points that we can pull from IXL, and one of the interesting things is, as a district, when you look at all 3 schools, about 87% of the questions that are being addressed are inside the classroom, where the other 13% are actually taking place at home, where students are doing this on their own. Some teachers may assign some of this to, that's enrichment or remediation, and they're doing those things at home. So our students can access this at home as well. And then, as I mentioned before, it prepares them for the Arizona State assessments that will come in the springtime. And just again, for an overview, and then I'll turn things over to Ms. Merkel. I know Dr. Glass has some items that she wants to discuss as far as STAR. But when you look at this, our district data, over 3,800 hours have been spent on IXL lessons alone just this semester. Our students have answered over 579,000 questions in a course of 5 to 6 months, which is pretty astonishing when you start to think about, we have roughly 1,400 students, and you do the math on that. IXL, the programmers there state that to see any significant growth, students should answer 15 questions per week. And we have a lot of teachers that are having some of our students answer 25, 30 questions a week. So we're far above that number. We've had students master over 11,000 skills. They're proficient over 14,000 skills. And currently we have 70% of our teachers that are engaged daily in IXL. Dr. Glass, did you want to share items? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Would you be able to get us data on movement of students from one level to another?
So we're going to be able to do that. This that we're presenting to you today is the initial diagnostic.
Okay.
We're preparing to take the mid-year assessment, so then we'll be able to see the growth of our students.
But tonight, actually, too, when Mr. Martin presents on all 3 schools, you'll actually see score breakdowns for each grade level in math and English. And next to that, you'll see where they're at as far as how much they've increased their points total. So you'll see that next to it. And I know it'll go into more detail, but highlighted areas will actually show you too which grade levels average-wise are either on or above grade level.
So with STAR reading, as I shared with you before, it is one of the required assessments from the state for Move On When Reading. Move On When Reading is the determination of students that must be retained or can move on in 3rd grade based on their grade level reading abilities. So STAR reading it's unfortunate that IXL is not one of the options for the assessment. There are very specific assessments, the majority of them were paper pencil, and we wanted to try to cut down on the teacher administration of the assessments. So going with this online assessment seemed to be more effective. Although we did struggle with our kinder students with logging in, and our great kinder team did work through all of that. But once the students take the assessment, they can go in and, much like IXL, answer questions and do work and receive instruction both in remediation and intervention and enrichment, so that students can grow in their reading ability. Teachers have the ability to go in and, based on the student's score and the areas of concern, get information on what the student needs in order to grow in their reading ability, and provides a lot of really great information for our staff. And so we, again, just starting to use this and are really focusing on the use of IXL this year, but using STAR as our diagnostic and move on when reading assessment.
So this is just some data points that we're taking from Star Reading for the elementary school. Again, kindergarten is in blue, first grade in red, purple is second grade, and then the orangish hue color is third grade. You can see kind of where they fall along these lines in regards to the benchmarks.
So you can see the intervention or the identification of students falls within these four categories of requiring urgent intervention, intervention on watch, so they're kind of on that bubble and can move either way, or they're at or above benchmark. And you can see that we have some pretty significant needs of our students that are in the urgent area. And then some really great progress of our students in the area of reading at or above grade level. And then we've got our kiddos right in the middle.
Is this year's data?
This is this year's data. This is our first year using this assessment.
And the numbers on the side, is that a percentage or is that a number of students?
Like the 40,
Like,
40,
yeah.
is that
Do you
actual
remember
head count?
in this graph which
This
one
graph.
it is?
I think it is their benchmark score. It's not the number of students necessarily.
So how do we know how many students are urgent?
Yeah, I apologize. I did not pull this particular data point, so I'm not certain on the exact measure.
We'll maybe on the next
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's alarming, actually. And I'm glad to see the high end. But the rest of it's not spread out like I would hope to see it.
Right.
What are we doing uniquely for those students that fall into the red category?
So at McDowell Mountain, we have a Title I reading specialist. She has been working with our students at the K-1 level. We have a new reading supplemental program, Foundations, that teaches reading based on 8 or 9 skills to help you with that. We are systematically taking all of our kinder through first grade students through that program. And then our staff use a lot of other resources and instructional strategies to teach reading with students. But right now we are, that staff goes over and above to help kids learn to read, but we are working through the standards, working through this reading program, and using this data to determine how to help students, individual students, move forward. I don't have the specific information on that particular site, but I can get that for you.
You mentioned early on the individualized instruction element of this. And I think, the hardest thing for a classroom teacher is to work at both ends of those in the same classroom. You're 4 of these guys are here, is the way you're looking at it.
Right.
And you're gonna need to focus a lot more of your attention on the red students. And I'm just wondering, with that, and the whole concept of individualized instruction, in the classroom, how is that being handled?
question. So, at the various schools, it can be done, I think, in a multitude of ways. I know being at the elementary, you'll see, you'll see centers and you'll see students working on different things periodically throughout a class period. So you'll have a group working on this activity, this group working on it, but it's all kind of related to, relatable standards. And so you may have a group that's just at their computers using their Chromebooks, and they're doing maybe IXL lessons or they're doing star reading lessons, and they're all geared towards their level, their current level, or maybe just a slight bit beyond that, to help them with that. Well, maybe the other stations or centers that they're working on are all the same skill set, or at the same level, but you do have that differentiation component within a particular lesson.
Well, I'm hoping that we don't get to the point where we use this data to assign teachers to students in classrooms. That has never worked. I think it's important that each classroom have this makeup, and that faculty be trained to work with both ends of that spectrum. And no one's ever going to be perfect at it, because it's a hard one. I know my classroom's no different. I don't have quite that big a red area, but I've got a huge middle area. And trying to keep the green area from, playing games all day, because they finish their assignments in 5 minutes, where the red people are still working on it in the class period. But that's a skill that every teacher eventually needs to have if they're going to be successful, and most of them do. What kind of support have we put in place to help those students, help the teachers be better at both ends of the spectrum?
Right, and I totally see where you're coming from, and I think one of the things that we set out to do to try to, again, just identify where our kids are at, most importantly. I know when I first started teaching, I had an evaluator tell me that I was instinctive, and asked me a question after an observation and said, how do you know that your kids got what you needed them to? I didn't know how to answer that question. And he goes, but where's your data to prove that? And this helps our teachers become better, because now they have, I know little Johnny is far behind, but how far behind? Or I know Susie's really far ahead, but how far ahead? And I think those are the discussions that we're now starting to have on each one of our campuses, where I think before we weren't able to and didn't have the ability to, because we didn't have the data necessarily to do so, unless it was a state standardized test or an ACT or an SAT score. And that's a one-shot deal that doesn't really have any remediation or time to go in and dive into it. It's a one-time deal, and that's it.
First graders don't take these.
Exactly.
And not all kids do well on standardized tests.
Absolutely.
On your chart there, you have most recent test and projected. What's the, obviously the most recent test is what you did, but what's your projected? Where does that come from?
The projected is based off of the growth in the work that the students are currently doing within the system.
So they're getting worse, is it projected to be worse?
No, so moving to the right is actually projected.
I see, so it's the expected green side. So the top one is the one that is
Already actually,
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the expected.
Sure. Any other questions on star reading, and then we can move to the IXL data for each school?
You remember when you went back to your school days and you had to do a group project? And you always.
So did you carry the weight?
You always, no, you always sought out the smartest, best looking person in the class, and then you hitched them. So what I have here is kind of the breakdown of the 3 schools. The middle school got a little bit of a head start. We had access to IXL, all 4 subject areas last year, which was new for me, but not necessarily new for our staff, and came in quite handy with our various models of learning. But what we try to do with IXL is along with STAR, get a baseline at the beginning of the year for our students, and we were
quite lucky that this year with our experience, we were able to get that baseline pretty easy. So this is the breakdown of sort of the diagnostic piece of IXL. So McDowell Mountain, 75% of their students had completed the beginning of the year by the middle of September. The middle of the year, we're all shooting for completion in January. And then the end of the year, we complete there in May, and it gives us a nice little package of this is where the students started and this is where they went to. Just a quick breakdown of their site with numbers of hours of use and questions answered. And then the second and third grader using IXL and ELA and math the most. Social studies and science don't give you a diagnostic. They play off of where you are in ELA and math, and then the teacher can go in and find lessons based on the content that they are studying, and then it builds them sort of practice material on the content using the skills that they continue to need to develop. So that's just kind of a snapshot of McDowell Mountain. 94% of the teachers have set up IXL classes. 76% of the teachers are using IXL. 6% are actively engaged. You'll see the same thing with us. Like I'll just use my school as an example. So
what constitutes active engagement?
So it looks at how often your students are logging in to engage.
So do you have to they have to log in at least once a month or once a week? Like what puts them into the actively engaged category?
It's over. The last chart I looked at, it talked about you're using the system over 50% of the time, and I think it's tracking by number of school days versus number of logins.
Okay.
You can also see on the data points, it'll have a set amount of questions, like a goal amount to hit,
Like that per week.
and it measures how many students are hitting that goal within a teacher's classroom per week.
And so when you look at their scores here, this is what Chris was talking about as far as you have sort of the beginning average diagnostic for the grade level, and then as kids continue to go in there and work, it averages out sort of the growth of how those students have made it to this point. So the first, and kind of the hundreds kind of match up with what grade level they should be at. So if they're in the 100s as a first grader, they're on grade level, things like that. So McDowell Mountain had their kids testing in the middle of September with the beginning of the year. You can see those that were on grade level, and then you can see sort of the average point growth that they're making as they continue to go. The diagnostic test is sort of a small encapsulated test, but as part of that then, as they continue to work on those skills, it continues to add numbers into their diagnostic test. So they can take just kind of a sample test by itself, or it can grow throughout the entire semester.
Are your tests, or these tests, I should say, more objective or more cognitive?
So just like any of these other programs, the more questions you answer correctly, the harder the questions get, and then it cuts you off at a certain point. The least questions you answer correctly, it goes the other direction and gives you more questions and more at-bats, more opportunities. At the middle school, because we had done it before, early September, we had 97% of our students tested. Once again, we'll complete the middle of the year in January, end of the year in May. It looks like that we use it a whole lot and answer a whole lot of questions and don't do much else up there, but our teachers, because they had it last year and the other schools are finding this as well, they found ways to embed it into their classes almost on a daily basis. So there's the core part of the lesson, the independent practice, and then when students finish, their option usually is to jump on and do IXL, or we use it during our academic strategies time. They're a 7th period, and I'll show you here in a minute. It builds the kid a skill pattern package for them. And so we have quite a few questions and hours of use, but we are using it in all 4 subject areas. 100% of our teachers have their classes set up, mostly because they just rolled over from last year as far as them, and then they go through and find their students. 71% of our teachers use IXL, 50% of our teachers actively engage, because when I went through and I was like, oh man, only 50%. But, you know, the PE teachers have classes built, but they don't necessarily use it all of the time. So a lot of our elective teachers have classes built, but they're not using it. So when I look at who my core teachers are and my elective teachers are, that 50% is pretty close to who should be using it on a regular basis. These were our numbers from the beginning of the year and where we're headed. Not quite as many kids at grade level, and obviously you know, some deficits that we need to address, but then there point growth there as they're continuing to grow throughout the semester.
It's not consistent between English and math from grade level to grade level, right? Like, 4th grade, 5th grade math is behind, but then 5th grade, or 6th grade math is ahead and has grown a lot, right? And the same with like the 8th grade math.
That can be based on the cohort, though, because
Yes.
even when they did, you know, Ames or AG Merit, you know, one year, 5th grade math was fantastic, and the next year it wasn't. And it was based on the cohort. It wasn't, you know, there's certain cohorts that we followed from kindergarten on, and they just never performed well on standardized tests.
Although we did also have certain grade levels that consistently, like when they got to that grade level, the cohort might have done better than the previous year's cohort, but that grade level was like where we always had a deficit.
Right. So yeah, so it just really depends.
Well, on top of that, Mr. Markle and I talked about this just this week. The 7th grade cohort, if you look at their math scores, he was telling me, you know, that they had a teacher in 5th grade that they lost, they had to start all over, and then last year, 6th graders, they had our virtual teacher, and then now they're kind of back in it. So for 2 years, they kind of had some hiccups in math. So that would also add to seeing some more deficits or gaps in their learning.
So can I jump into, so for teachers, were they able to, this is great to see, snapshot, but are they able to go in and look at mastery of skills and deficits to make them embedded in the class? Okay.
Absolutely. And my look at this and conversation with my staff, you know, the middle school model is all about the team approach and you know, we're all just kind of this small family. Our conversations now are shifting a little bit more to getting back into that those vertical discussions and you know, having all of our math teachers together and sort of building that vertical pattern. And so it, you know, it not only teaches them, it teaches me where we need to head with our PD and things like that. The high school, similar, you know, you kind of see a similar phase as the elementary school, and our numbers probably would have looked like this last year as well, as they're just getting used to using it. They're using it as an ELA and math, so you see where they're at and their timetable for completing diagnostics. Their engagement, they have the classes built, 100% of their math and ELA teachers are using it, and then 7% are actively engaged for use of assessment purposes, and that's a separate side that they can use as well. And then
So it's all great, even through 12. Okay.
yeah. And then these are their particular numbers as well.
And since nobody's highlighted, nobody's at grade level, so with that,
Correct.
depending on what to do.
Yeah.
And what you also, yes, and that's also for 12th grade, like for math, is that to determine we don't have either pluses or minuses because again, a majority of our seniors don't have that math class.
Right.
So they've done their requirements, but they're done. And another thing that you'll also notice too, as if you go into the weeds of the data for the high school, at 12th grade, they can't go, they don't get measured beyond grade level. Like, we have some students that they score like 1,300, 1,400, but it stops at 12th grade, so it just says they're on grade level.
Sure.
So we're not actually able to assess that ability either, so.
It's almost like math, doesn't make sense to do grade level, it makes sense to do algebra,
Correct.
algebra two, because they're all different.
And yeah, especially as you get past freshman year, most of the freshmen are in algebra 1 or geometry, but then when you'll have algebra 3, some of them are in even pre-calc and even beyond. So it makes it hard, at least for me, putting in the data and analyzing it and trying to make it organized and make sense for our building leaders and the teachers, it makes it challenging for sure.
Yeah, that's where, AZ Merit at least got that part right, that no matter what grade you were in, you were testing. Well, no, actually, they did know, so they didn't get that right, no, never mind. But same thing, like our kids could have been in,
Algebra.
AP statistics, and they'd take like the algebra class because they were sophomores or whatever, so that's the difficult part. It'd be nice if somebody actually figured that out.
And I will say, I'm a fan of ISL, Karen, I'm the no idea how teachers feel about it, but I think it would be an amazing opportunity to study for the ECTs and the SATs. So I would strongly encourage, I was told by my 12th grader that he doesn't have an ISL account, which I find hard to believe, but in my mind, to use it as an opportunity to study those tests, because you have to go back in skills, like algebra, if you're already in statistics or calculus. So I would just encourage to get those basic skills if they're taking those standardized tests for college. It's a great way to do it.
So this is just a sample of a student that I pulled from our school. You were asking about what the teacher might see or what the student might see, and so this is breaking down different components of math for them, and then it also the grayed out areas there. The area underneath there, that's what's showing you what the recommended skills are that they need to continue to work on to develop at that particular grade level. And so every student, after they complete the diagnostic, IXL builds them what's called a personal action plan. And so if the teacher says, all right, I need you to log into your IXL and look at your personal action plan, then that is what they'll see, and then they can click on those areas. It will take them to the appropriate lessons, and they'll continue to work on that. So once we have the diagnostic, as they continue to work through it, then this is where it begins to break down more for the teacher and the student as far as where their lagging skills might be.
And these are all, these lessons are online. Do you evaluate which students work better in that environment than others?
We use it kind of across the board, and like I said, we supplement what the day's lesson was with IXL, or we use it there during our academic strategies time. But the expectation is they're all on, giving their best effort. Where we talked about going next, obviously completed the diagnostics 1 full year cycle, how we incorporate the personal action plans better, identifying lagging skills. I've talked about how it can be embedded into classes, can be embedded into reteach, academic strategies, power hour, things like that. But really and truly, it's another data point to help us sort of triangulate and see where we need to go. We've also got really good traction with beyond textbooks and the common formative assessments, and using performance matters and building the benchmarks in there gives us more and more and more data to look at so that we can kind of narrow down where our students are at. So it's a great tool, but it's a piece of the puzzle that we need to continue to use. And like I said, year 2 of this has been very seamless at our school. I can see the other 2 schools picking up steam as they continue to go. And as we continue to develop PLCs and department work, and like I talked about vertical alignment, these are just more talking points to to begin to have conversations on how to help kids and make their education better.
And then I would also just add in closing, this is not an instrument that we use to assess the effectiveness of an educator. This is to increase their work and their conversations and their collaboration. When they look at the data as a department or a team at a grade level or a subject matter, they can look and go, my kids scored really well on this standard, but they didn't score well here, and it was the opposite for you. So what are you doing differently than I am? What can I take from you? What can you take from me so our kids can all achieve at these levels? So I think it kind of spurs on even more dialogue before, between our teachers and, because education is or can be a very isolated profession and working singly, and I think that this really helps kind of provide some dialogues and talking points for our teams and our departments.
Any other questions before we move on to the
Okay, so continue on. Naviance is both new and old for our district. Naviance has been utilized at the high school for a number of years, but not necessarily at the level that I'm going to discuss with you tonight. We'll also discuss about how it's being utilized at our middle school as well. One of the big initiatives of our district, as you've seen, Avid on our high school campus, and even some resemblances of it even down in our middle school with the career exploration class for 7th and 8th graders, is we're not just college ready, we're also career ready, and Naviance does both. And I'm going to just kind of give everybody a 30,000-foot view of Naviance, and not really bore you to death and go into the weeds, but just kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be asking our students to do, the counselors and so forth, and working with our students, and even some of our teachers using this program. So exactly what is Naviance? Naviance is a comprehensive K-12 college and career readiness solution that helps districts and schools align students' strengths and interests to post-secondary goals, improving student outcomes, and connecting learning to life. So throughout the presentation, you'll see resemblances of all of those things, where students will actually be taking personality assessments, career assessments, gauging their interests, and we'll start all the way in 6th grade. And that was kind of our plan. We met a little earlier on, and as I transitioned over to the district office this summer, our license with Naviance was up for renewal. And in talking to the counselors at the high school last year, they expressed to me this is how we utilize it, and it was just scratching the bare surface of what Naviance can do. And a lot of it had to relate to our ECAP needs and reporting to the state for that college and career ready piece. And the reports that we had to give and lessons the counselors had to do, which Naviance can certainly do, but it can definitely do a heck of a lot more. And so talking to the Naviance rep and then talking to Dr. Glass, we elected to in essence, purchase the Cadillac version of Naviance and help our middle school students kind of, start thinking about, what do I need to do in the next umpteen years to get where I want to be? And again, I'm not saying a 12-year-old has to have an idea of what they want to be when they grow up, because it'll change, because all of them want to be NBA basketball players, right? Like that's their dream. That was mine when I was 12, but I'm barely 6 feet tall, so that didn't happen. So this gives you, it gives students an idea, a pathway to have self-discovery, career exploration, even success planning, and even beyond post-secondary. So this slide is a screenshot of our scope and sequence for Naviance. And you can see the assessments, the career planning, college planning. They have their own individualized planning tools. They have About Me tools where they take like surveys, like what's their game plan, graduation surveys as far as like what their experience was like as they went through our school system. And then there's various curriculum pieces that they'll have. The X's indicate when, in which grade level, our students will engage in these activities or surveys throughout the course of their time with us. And so you can see it increases in frequency, the things that we're going to ask them to do or put in front of them as they get a little closer to graduation. Because again, that's obviously the time that they should be thinking even more and more about transitioning out of high school and hopefully moving out of their parents' houses, which a lot of them are probably wanting to stay, because rent's expensive. But
one of the first things that we have to do, and I'll talk more specifically about these, is the career cluster finder for sixth graders. And also just kind of, what are their favorite careers, what are their interests, what's their path? And then we even transition into, and I'll talk more about this, college, doing college searches. A lot of kids may just be familiar with local colleges and institutions, but, others might have lived in a different state and want to go back, and now they have to realize, okay, out-of-state tuition versus in-state tuition, what is the difference? As a person that came from out-of-state to go to college, there's a big difference in out-of-state versus in-state. What's the admittance rate? What's the dropout rate? And so Naviance can actually give that information based off of the searches that students do and their interests.
Does it support in the interest of not just college readiness, but more of a holistic career readiness that may not involve a college path? Does our scope and sequence also support, those kids who maybe don't want to go to college and instead need to look at what is an apprenticeship path that I can take for the type of career that I think I'm going to go into?
It does. It gives them even institutions that they visit, like an ITC Tech, for example, that just gives them additional training and skills to go get a higher paying job right out of high school. Just that extra bit of knowledge beyond high school. It certainly does.
Does it align with the state career planning system?
It does. Yep. Yeah, that was one of the things that we discussed with Naviance, because they asked us what we wanted this to be able to do for us, and they in essence customized it for what we do. We sought the input of the high school counseling team as well as the middle school counseling team. What would you want to see? How would you utilize this? And then we went back to them and said, here's what we need, here's what we would like, and they built our scope and sequence for us. And it's a fairly standard scope and sequence that they use, but there were some minor tweaks based off of the input that we gathered from our counselors, specifically at the high school level, saying, well, this is generally when we would do this survey, or this is generally when we would do this. So there was some kind of tweaking of it based off of that feedback, but in essence, it's customized for our needs and what we wanted it to look like for our community.
If you put a pathway plan together at some grade level that is based on this, that has the ability to help parents decide, what classes the students should take going forward,
yep.
Whether they should go into a college prep, whether they should go into a career prep, or obviously everybody should do both. But
certainly, yes, and there's ways for parents to log in, just like all of our parents can log in and say Power School and view grades, or PLP and view grades and progress. Naviance has that same capability. We're still moving to our data over. It's been a little time because we wanted to obviously tackle the students first and input their information so they can begin using it. But as we work with our IT department, we'll start the process of inputting the parent information, and you guys will get notified as parents saying, here's your Naviance password to log in, and you can monitor the things that your children are doing within the system. But one of the other things, and I'll talk more about this, is that one of the steps, I can't remember which grade level, I think it's right within high school, but there's SMART goals. And they'll establish SMART goals and measure those. And so the counselor's part of their responsibility will be, they'll enter classrooms and they'll do push-ins. And so maybe at the high school, they're going into the English class and meeting with ninth graders, and they're having them do these assessments. And some of them are 5, 10 minutes, and others take a little longer than that. So it's based off of just communication with the teams and what works for the teachers, and trying to not have as much classroom disruption and time away from the actual curriculum. But this is important work as well. So yes, there's definitely those planning criteria, and not something that we're looking at trying to implement is a 4-year plan of study, like you would when you enter the collegiate ranks, where you kind of look at, okay, I think this is what I want my major to be. Here's the prereqs that I have to get out of the way in order to get here. So we're not quite there yet. That's something that we're looking to build. I know when I worked in Scottsdale, we used Naviance extensively, and that was one of the things. I know the counselors loved it because it made scheduling students' classes for the following year so simple. The kids would come in, they'd hop on a computer, they would fill out their things, their schedules, hit submit, done. And then the counselors would be able to log into Naviance and start doing the class balances and so forth. So it's a really neat instrument. The other thing, Naviance was just purchased by Power School. I just received an email today saying the transaction is complete and they're now going to be married together. So
You're like a salesperson.
no, I geek out with this stuff, so it's fun to look at it. But No, it's really neat just because I think it just gives our students even more tools and things that we were already implementing. Naviance was one of those, but now with this rebirth of Avid on our high school campus and doing Avid in every classroom and school-wide. And then you can see at our middle school with the career exploration class and the work that they're doing there within that class with Ms. Mills group is really cool. And we set her up for accounts so her kids can start utilizing it, more and going into this classroom. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how it evolves over the course of this school year and beyond.
Does this have any effect on our tiered enrollment system?
It's a good question. We haven't really measured that and evaluated that at this point, but like the different the honors and so forth. So some of the features and benefits, again, I touched on these a little bit: self-discovery, career research tools, college research tools, and then the about me areas. So first, the self-discovery. What is it? It gives students that unique perspective of what are their strengths and possibly their weaknesses. It connects them to their interests and to possible careers. For example, with some students, like, I think engineering would be a really cool field, but they're really poor at math, or really poor at science, so they have to make a decision, right? Like, I'm really gonna dive into math and science so I can be an engineer, or hey, maybe that's really not something that I'm cut out for. Not to discourage, but just to be real. And then to set goals, as I mentioned before, setting SMART goals and measuring those throughout the course of their time with us. And then just simply, I think, just developing self-knowledge and personal motivation. What does it take to get where I want to be? And I can relate to this particular item because, again, as I'm a first-generation college student. Neither one of my parents, went to college or had the ability to do so, and I got pushed really hard. But when it came time for me to go, I didn't really have anybody to turn to besides maybe a teacher or a coach or my counselor about what that looked like. Where do I go? What questions do I ask? I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think for those types of students, this is awesome because they can get those answers and not be embarrassed to necessarily ask. And then again, some of these items our students would be asked to do. The Strength Explorer, it assesses, talent themes and identifies students. There's 3 strongest emerging talents. Based off of that, the Career Cluster Finder, it will give suggestions on careers based off of strengths that they have been assessed on. And only at the high school is the Career Interest Profiler. This is where career interest assessments for students based on the Holland's Interest Code, students will gain access to help their Holland Code matches. So they'll look at careers that match their interests and potential aptitudes as well. And then the Learning Style Inventory assesses, this assessment helps determine the student's ideal learning and productivity conditions. So there's some students, and you probably, as your own children, you've seen them do homework. Some of them really like to have the radio on, or TV in the background, that soft noise helps. Others have to have it completely quiet. Again, just an example, I think that learning inventory will help students identify how do they best learn. Are they kinesthetic? Are they more visual? Are they auditory? It just kind of helps them identify what their learning environment is to best suit their needs.
On the Strengths Explorer, it's only once, and I went back and looked at it, and says that it's in 9th grade. Is that recommended by Naviance?
That's the recommendation.
Like, can students take it more than once? Because
Certainly.
I'm like, I know from both of my kids, they're completely different kids by the time they get to 12th grade than what they were in 9th grade. And they would have had a completely different, because I realize it's supposed to be you're, assessing your strengths, but your strengths can change as you progress through classes. Maybe you were not so great in math, and then you knuckle down, and now you're great in math. And so then, is there the opportunity for students to do that again, so that they can get kind of a new projection based on their growth that they've had through their high school years?
Absolutely, and one of the cool things about Naviance as well is that what I showed you in the scope and sequence is, again, probably a tenth of what they actually offer. And so the great thing, I think, being a smaller school district, our counselors really know our students pretty darn well, and they can use the other assessments that are within there that may dive a little bit deeper into
maybe a strength or a particular interest that they may have. And so we were absolutely not kind of, I guess, shackled or caught into a corner where we have to do it this way. Yeah. Again, it's simply a suggestion. And again, we can move when we give a certain measurable at a particular grade level. Yeah. And so the Career Cluster Finder is an online questionnaire that helps students discover career clusters that are most interesting to them. And once a student completes their career cluster, top matching career clusters are made available for review. And so they can really kind of start looking at, and again, on the little fake computer screen, you'll see there's areas of like agriculture, food, natural resources, art, auditory, video, technology, communication, etc. I laugh at the agricultural thing. My 4-year-old always says she wants to be a farmer. So it's just funny to me that she wants to do that. She lives in Mesa, nowhere near a farm. And then just kind of the areas, and then they can click on those agricultural clusters, and they can see what professions fall under that category, and do further research on them. They can look at where do most of these professions reside, what areas of the country. You know, if you're like, I'm going to be a watermelon farmer, you're probably not going to live in Arizona if you want to be a watermelon farmer, right? You know, what the cost of living is, like what are the costs into that, you know, what are the benefits or drawbacks. So it really gives them a comprehensive viewpoint of what it would be like to be in that profession or go down that path. And I really like this one, this road trip one. This is, Naviance actually took, they say, 52 road trips and interviewed several different leaders, creating videos, kind of talking more about the themes and the interests of a particular career. And so students are actually able to hear like real life teachers talk about their profession and what it looks like to be a teacher. I know when I got into teaching, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize there was this much paperwork involved in being a teacher, or lack of sleep. And so, you know, I think it helps them kind of hear it directly from the people that are in that profession, which is pretty neat. And then the college piece, the research tool, the Finding Your Match College. Naviance College research tools are focused on helping students find their best fit for college and prepares them to apply and pay for college. There's like a FAFSA tool that they can do, and then there's actually like a FAFSA review, where again, I think some parents are very, I think, clueless on FAFSA totally. It helps them, it helps the student kind of identify, okay, what do I need to do, what documents do I need to gather, and prepare for questions. I know, I remember talking with seniors even last year at the high school about this, not knowing what scholarships are available, you know, in my area or at a specific school that I'm applying to, that they would be eligible for. And we saw this even last year where our students are applying for, you know, scholarships, and some of those scholarships just go unapplied for. And we're begging students, apply, you're gonna get it, like you're the only one, you're gonna get this money. So it just kind of helps them navigate that path if that's where they wanna go as far as college. So the Super Match, interactive, visually friendly college search experience added to Naviance students. Students can select from many criteria. So if they want to see, like, man, I really want to go to college in Hawaii. Cool. What are the schools in Hawaii? What programs of study are at those universities? What's the tuition at that school? What's the admittance rate, et cetera? So it'll show them all of those things to kind of either maybe encourage them to want to move that way. I mean, there's some of our students that may have ambitions to go to the Ivy Leagues, go to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, you name it. And then they look at, okay, well, what's the acceptance rate? Wow, that's going to be tough. What do I need to score on my SAT, ACT? What's my GPA? What kind of community service do I have to have? It gives them all of that in a framework, you know, very early on, so they can start planning and preparing. One of the other cool tools about this, and I can relate to this going through the process as many of you can, the college application process. It's tedious, it's long, it's monotonous because a lot of the applications are the same. A lot of the information that you have to give is the same. A lot of the questions that you're asked is the same. So what Naviance calls is their one-stop shop, or one and done, I think is what they officially call it. Is where students can actually start beginning the application process and filling these things out. They can save them and they can actually reuse that information for other various applications they may complete for other universities. Recommendations, they can start collecting letters of recommendation from teachers and other adults that may help their chances of getting into a college, and they can store them and house them right here. Adults can actually send them directly to their Naviance account,
and the students can upload them there as well. And then two, they can track scholarships as well, scholarships that they've applied for. They can dump into their queue scholarships that they want to apply for, and they can monitor their progress there to kind of keep them tracking, what they're doing and what they still need to accomplish. And then finally, the About Me section. This is that kind of career aspect, even post-collegiately, if that's the chance they go, or even after high school, is how to build a resume. Even for some of us nowadays, that's a tough challenge, to build a resume. What do I include? What do I exclude? How do I sell myself? How do I get my skills on a piece of paper in this little window for someone to read and go, I really need to talk to that person for this job. So it kind of walks them through that process of, the different sections. What's the objective? What do you want to do? What are you getting out of this? We need work experience, education, extracurriculars, awards, et cetera, that they've had. Again, it kind of walks them through how to map out their resume, what to include, and narrow down their focus as they put pen to paper to construct their own resume.
Do you encourage the students to get on LinkedIn, for example?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
thinking that too. I'm like, well, most people just cruise up to LinkedIn and look at your profile, and then they're like, oh, this is what is beyond the resume.
Do you have to be 18 to be on LinkedIn though?
Well, you have to have permission if you're not 18 with your parent, but you need to start that like in ninth grade, because whether you're gonna apply for McDonald's or McDonald Douglas, LinkedIn is where they're going.
Yeah, I had the experience to go, Ms. Mail's career exploration class, they did mock interviews. And I was one of the people that got to interview the students, and they did a great job, and it was really cool to kind of get to chat, to have a chance to have a conversation with them about, and some of them are far beyond where I was at their age as far as what they want to think about and what they want to do and how they can articulate that was pretty impressive. And, I think it's a great idea to start having those conversations early and often about those different avenues because, again, I think in this day and age, those kids, they know social media, they know Twitter, they know Instagram, they know Facebook, and I know they probably like Facebook, that's for old people, right? They don't use that, but, right. But with, they might not be familiar with the job postings and how to get your name out there and sell yourself and make yourself marketable because that's what it's about. You're your own brand nowadays, and you have the ability to do so. And so those are important conversations to start having and showcasing. And then the last point simply is the Naviance Journal. Students can actually have a journal section where teachers and counselors can actually have access to this and view this, and they can respond to journal entries. So this can actually be embedded into, say, maybe an English curriculum as a part of maybe an enrichment activity or so forth too. Again, just kind of have that in our core curriculum, but also encouraging a career college readiness piece as well. And so that does it. At the end, I have links both to the high school and middle school sites, and so people can peruse that. But again, parents, again, they will have access to this probably a little after break as we get things kind of worked out, sorted out as far as the data upload. But right now this is live, and our counselors have begun working on these lessons within Naviance with our students currently.
It's good, over the years, we've had some great counselors, but a lot of tools for them to work with. This is the most comprehensive tool I've ever seen. We have something similar to this at EDIT, but more career-oriented.
Sure.
And general like this is.
Yeah, that was the feedback that, and talking to the high school counselors last year, I'm like, how do you two use Naviance? I'm like, well, we send emails to the seniors and their parents, and we do ECAP. That's about it. And so we started having more discussions about what can Naviance do, here are the tools, and honestly, they said that we really haven't been trained in all of these things, Chris. Like, it'd be great to learn more about it. So as Kelly and I talked about, going a little bit further in our purchase of Naviance. Okay, we're going to use it, and this is going to be a tool to help our students and along their path and their journey and where they want to go. And that needs to start early rather than hey, I'm a junior, what am I going to do? So.
I like the theme for the prom is through the rabbit hole, and the rabbit said, if you don't know where you're going, anywhere will get you there. And so I'm glad that we're kind of trying to find helps them find their way.
Exactly.
Are the counselors getting, some kind of training so they know what's available?
They have,
They do. Okay.
absolutely. Yep. Yep. All right, you're very welcome.
Here's your action. If you would like to see an item on a future board agenda, you can reach out to Krista. Dates of upcoming meetings, our next meeting, Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. Business meeting at 6:30 p.m. And then after that, we have another meeting Wednesday, January 26th, 2022, which is a work study session that starts at 5 p.m. Both of those meetings will be here in the FHUSD Learning Center. And with that, I move that we adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.